Hey everyone, thanks for coming on The Show Must Go On line. Today's guest is Ian Weinberger. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm so glad to be here with you all. With you and with you all in the world.
Right. Yes. And for everyone who's watching at home, if you have any comments, questions, you can just write them all down. I have the whole comment section here from YouTube. So that's wonderful. And how, we always ask, like, how are you doing? But like, these have been pretty crazy times in so many ways. So like, how have you been doing, like, emotionally? And just like Anne Hamill film just came out, so that's like another element.
Totally. It's been a roller coaster, as I'm sure has been true for most of your guests and for all of you watching, and for you as well. I think we've all experienced this in very different ways. And I think for me it comes and goes very quickly. I think like the ups and downs are very real. And I think, gosh, it's been so long now since the Broadway shutdown, and we're about to hit 4 months, and I think in that time we've all learned a lot about the nature of our work and the fragility of that work. I mean, we all thought that Broadway was invincible. Right. I think Broadway has gone dark almost never in its history, but like in very specific times, for like the crew strike and the musician strike, and then for like a day after 9/11, and that's basically it. Right. And so I remember in March when the first sort of rumblings about the virus were starting to trickle about like, oh, there are cases in the US now.
Yeah.
How naive am I, thinking like it won't stop us, and here we are. And so we've learned a lot about the science in that time. We've learned a lot about our work in that time. We've learned very many things about the world in that time. It's been very tough, but I miss work a lot. I miss the people at work a lot. And an hour ago I was on our sort of weekly Hamilton Zoom, which we have just to sort of like catch up with people, and we do it every week anyway, just to say hi and stay in touch. And this week was especially fun because of course we all watched the movie, and that we can talk for sure about the movie, but certainly this moment has been you're catching me at the end of a very Hamiltonian resurgence in my brain, which has been really fun because I don't know, for a few weeks there I was like admittedly not thinking about Hamilton very much, and that was refreshing, honestly. But wild to see it again. It was all very exciting.
Yeah, I could only imagine working on a show for 8 times a week for X amount of years, and then poof, it's gone. And then like a hurricane, it just swoops right back in.
It's wild. And all of a sudden it's like a very active topic on the internet, and I'm opening up the New York Times every morning and there's 3 or 4 articles about Hamilton, and I'm like, this is like the old days. I was pretty sure that degree of prevalence about the show, about the conversation about the show, had long since faded. Like I remember it well from the first year where like you couldn't swing a cat on the internet without, that's a phrase I don't really understand, without hitting something about Hamilton. And for a moment now we're feeling that again, which is very strange and exciting, and all the stranger because we're not at the theater doing it. Right. It's great, and I'm thrilled for it. It's just a bizarre thing because it makes me miss it all that much more.
I bet. And for everyone, for people who have seen these interviews before, you sometimes notice that my dog will make an appearance or start barking. So if you're like, what is all that barking in the background? That's just Slim living his best life. It just stopped raining. So I just Slim. And his sister is Shady. So
sure, naturally. Great.
I didn't name them, but I find it kind of funny.
I'm going to choose to believe that you did, and that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I always like to give that disclaimer just because people are like, I'm sorry, wait, is there like barking going on? Did I like hear that? And it's like, you're not You're not going crazy.
Yeah.
Yes. My friend Andy and I were actually talking this morning about like all of the new Hamill fans and being like, welcome on board, because it is so funny to think how many more people Disney Plus is now reaching. And, you know, when you're in the Hamilton circle, like you, especially because you work with them, and me, because I'm just like a super fan, it's like, you can't imagine that people haven't heard of it, let alone like that they don't know the music and they haven't heard of it. Like that to me is bonkers that in 2020 there's still people who just haven't heard of it. And like, are you having any like family members or friends or like people that you would mention maybe before, like, oh yeah, I'm the music director for Hamilton, or I'm the conductor for Hamilton. They're like, cool. And now that they've seen it, they're like, yo, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you ask. Like, not yet in this weekend since the movie. That definitely did happen. I remember, like back in the day, like right when the album dropped, I remember feeling, realizing like this unique thing where I used to have the phenomenon of having to say to my like extended family, yeah, I'm working on this musical. It's called this. It's about this. It's by this person. Okay, well, they wrote this musical. Okay, well, they wrote, never mind, like that sort of thing. And I started to find myself like being able to just start saying, I work at Hamilton. They're like, oh, I know what that is. I'm thrilled that so many people are discovering the show. But listen, many of us at Hamilton are big West Wing fans. And so I would quote CJ Craig to say, no, it was Sam Seaborn saying to CJ Craig, let's forget about the fact that you're late to the party and just embrace the fact that you showed up at all. And you're not late to the party because we'll be here. And I'm thrilled that there are more people. And it honestly excites me to get to share the show with new folks. Like I would honestly, I'm not sure that everyone knowing it, and then releasing the movie is the way to go. You know what I mean? Like I'm thrilled that releasing the movie and giving it new eyes is exciting. But to your question, the thing that I have noticed this time around is that I have a number of friends with really young kids because we're at that age, and I've seen like a couple of videos now of their young kids singing along or just watching the movie and being really excited. Or one close friend of mine sent me a video of her really young daughter recapping what she had seen so far, sort of like describing her take on Satisfied, for instance, and she like nails it. And I wrote my friend, I was like, your daughter knows it better than I do. But the reason I bring it up is that those kids were all born after the show opened. And it's wild to me to get to see it, not see it through their eyes, but to get to like wrap my brain around, oh my God, these are like 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds who are now just starting to like have the cognitive ability to be like, oh, this is a play that I can watch. Nice. It's been really fun.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a great point. I've been noticing like the Hamilton Twitter account has been like retweeting. There was this young girl who saw Philippa Sue and she was like, that's me, Mom, that's me. And I
wasn't that amazing? It was an incredible moment.
Right? Like my heart melted because that's why representation matters. And it was so cool to see that and to hear that that's happening like across the board, so that wasn't like an isolated incident.
Totally right. Totally right.
So I see over here that people are just like commenting away. Lisa, who has been a big Hamilton and FLS fan,
sure.
She says, we miss you. We will talk.
Hello, Lisa. Miss you back.
Yes, she will love that. And people are just saying, yes, you're amazing. And the new fans, perfect. Yes, Julie says perfect West Wing reference. So you're just like,
listen, the West Wing references come very fast, and I'm very excited actually because I'm home in Chicago now. I just got here a couple days ago, and my parents they don't know how much of a mistake this was, but they have volunteered to watch the West Wing again with me, which I've seen many times over, and they watched when it was live on TV on NBC, but haven't seen since. So I'm very excited to like get right back in the game with them. but yes, hello to all of you. I'm glad that the West Wing reference landed on somebody. That makes me happy.
It totally did. And I apologize. I'm going to just close the door because it sounds like it's just going to be like.
Close the door, whatever it is.
Bye,
It is like, you know, you made me think though about getting to share the show with folks, and especially, you know, with the Disney Plus of it all. It does make me excited. Even people who have seen it live are, I've heard from some friends and acquaintances and colleagues who are seeing it with new eyes, and who maybe haven't seen it since the first year, second year, and are, you know, getting a whole new appreciation for it. And I think, like I said on the Hamilton call a little while ago, like, I think the thing that makes me most excited, that struck me while watching it the other night, was that there are so many different takes on certain moments than people know from the album, and yet it's the same people, you know, right? Like, there's Leslie saying a line very differently than he does on the record, or David sings something very differently, and like the phrasing is so interesting. And like, what I love is that that's going to open people's minds to the possibility that which you definitely hear if you see the show live and you know the record. But if you haven't seen the show live and all you know is the record, you're going to hear this back and be like, oh, wow, I've only ever heard it this way before, but there's another option. And what we've said so much at the show, like when I work with actors and when I'm teaching them the music and when we're working on things together, is that the brilliance of the writing is such that there are so many different ways to approach most moments. There are, you know, the sentences are so dense and the language is so brilliant that there are, I always say, there are many right answers and many different ways to approach most moments in the show. There's very little in the way of you have to say it this way. And I'm glad that this is going to open people's minds to that. That makes me really happy.
That is such a good point, because I know, like, my Hamilton experience has been like listening to the cast album while I was a reporter in Texas and living in Maryland, and just like not knowing ever when I would see it. And so like all I had was that like imagination in my brain. Now I've seen it like on Broadway. I've seen Eduham. I've seen it in Chicago, Puerto Rico, London. Like, there have been so many. Wow. Yeah. You know, it's been
You've got Hamilton bingo.
Yes, right. Ding. Yeah, it's been a fun.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Get the 4 across, and you're like, yes.
That's right. Free space.
Yeah, we've actually joked about this. My boyfriend has seen it. Are you wait for it? 48 times.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's more than I've seen it.
Right, I know. And we were joking. We were like, hey, Lynn, is it like 50th time free? You know, like.
That's right. Buy 49, get 1 free.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. But and seeing so many different actors and the interpretations have been such a fun journey of Hamilton. And even going from the cast album that, like, you know, I could imagine David doing this line, but then watching it was like, oh, like him smirking or like having a grin while also rapping Guns and Ships was like, I wasn't aware that was a thing a person could do.
Totally. Absolutely right. I think, like, you know, one of the things that makes me think of is that our team, this comes top down, you know, Tommy and Andy and Alex have always been very, very clear about the fact that when we're looking for new cast members, especially when the originals started to leave, we were looking for those sort of first replacements. From then until now, they've been really clear about the idea that no one's looking for carbon copies.
Right.
I've often joked that, like, we don't want Renee. Well, we want Renee, but we don't, you know, we don't want somebody trying to be Renee. We want you.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important, and really is something that we all try to live up to. Those of us who continue to build the show and continue to teach the show. And I think, you know, I love that people say, wow, I never thought it could be that way, or I saw so many different takes this time. And I'll tell you that, you know, I've seen, I don't know, 20 odd people play the role. And, you know, that role and basically all of them are so very well written that there is so much to mine in there, and there's so many, like I said, there's so many right answers, and there's so much possibility. I remember going, you saw it in London, and did you see Giles as Burr, the original guy who won the Olivier for it?
We just saw it on my birthday, January 14th of this past year. So like of 2020. So
got it. Oh, very recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I'm betting you probably did not, because I think he might have left there. But nevertheless, Giles especially, but I'm sure the same is true with your experience. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just the British interpretation. Like, I sat there in London just like blown away by him. You know, I thought I knew the show pretty well. By then I had been with it 3 years, and I was just so amazed by the possibilities that he brought to it. I was like, I never considered that. The one that pops to my mind is in everybody's favorite song, Skylar Defeated, where what's the line? Wow, this is how long I've been away from the show. How does it go? It's not my what, but upstate people think you're crooked. What comes right before that? I have no memory of this.
Oh my God! Now I can see him like doing the little dance.
It doesn't matter, but the point is, there's the line, "But upstate people think you're crooked," and I loved the way he said "but upstate," and there was just this big emphasis on that syllable, and he sort of like gave it this energy that that said to me, at least from as an audience member, the subtext was like, you, the city slicker, Hamilton elitist, have no idea what the real people say in the country. But upstate, people think you're crooked. And I was so amazed by that line reading. So it was that level of excitement.
So I took it. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. I'm thrilled that people continue to get so many different things from it. I do too.
So I wanna rewind and go back to your origin story. Like, how did you get involved in music and being a music director and all of this to begin with that then led you to Hamilton?
Okay. Shut me up if this gets too long, please. It's funny you ask me this now, because I said to you right before we went online, I'm actually in my childhood bedroom, which is wild for me, and it's almost empty. You can see there's like nothing on the wall except my little Northwestern clock, because my parents are moving, so I've like packed up the whole house. So like there's nothing in this bedroom except what I brought with me and the clock. So it's a little wild that you asked me that question in this room. But the very short answer to this question is that when I left this bedroom to go to college at Northwestern, I was, yes, Kaylee, Beretta, go Cats. I can't believe you're here. Yeah. Nice to see you. One of my dear friends and collaborators, and we'll get into that later. Cool. I went to Northwestern to study music education. I was going to be a high school band director. And so my whole intent at that point was to get a teaching degree and get a job in a high school somewhere and teach band. And I was very excited to do that. And I ended up doing some theater at school sort of on the side at Northwestern. And the more I did of that, the more I was excited. First as a pit musician, as a drummer originally, and then like as an associate music director, and then as a music director. And I had no idea what a music director was, because especially at that time, but even a little bit now, like very few people teach music directing. There is now sort of a program at Northwestern, ironically, but since I left, and but nobody really teaches how to do it or what it is. So many of us just sort of like learned on the fly. But the more of it that I tried and failed and tried to learn from it, the more I got very excited by it. So when I left school, it was either apply for a teaching job or attempt a theater life. And that's how I sort of chose this life of crime. And I moved to New York, and with the dream of conducting on Broadway someday, because I was like, well, that looks really cool. And I used to go to shows in Chicago and to visit New York and go see a Broadway show. And like, I used to look such nerd out about the conductor just as a fan. Like I used to very much like I was that kid sitting in the audience being like, what's that guy doing? Like, what's the deal there? And I used to like very much nerd out about like, oh, he's cueing something, or who's he talking to on the phone? You know, like all of that stuff. And so what happened next? I blinked, and then Hamilton. It was,
It's a good blink.
Honestly, I was working on a bunch of different Broadway shows and off-Broadway shows as a music assistant for a while, which is very much exactly what it sounds like, the assistant to the music department, which is, oh, nice glasses, which is like sitting in the corner of the rehearsal room and trying not to bother anybody and sort of helping, basically being the stage manager for the music department as the show evolves, helping, making sure that everybody has the newest version of the music, or if we cut 4 bars, it's your job on the computer to update the music so that those 4 bars are removed from the show, or if they change the dialogue, now we put the dialogue in the music, or if we rewrite the ensemble vocals, whatever it may be, you're sort of the like nerd in the corner updating the score for everybody. So I loved those experiences because I got to work for the pros and watch them at work and ask questions, and all these people that I really sort of looked up to a lot then and still do. I learned so much from those experiences. And the short version is, well, could have been short up until now, was that I was the music assistant on a show called Chaplin, which maybe some of you have seen, which ran on Broadway for like 4 months. And as a sort of thank you for the work I did on Chaplin, the music director, Brian Perry, asked if I wanted to be a sub in the orchestra after opening, which of course I did. I did want to be, that is. And it was my first time subbing on Broadway. And the show sort of came and went very quickly, but having that opportunity as a sub sort of gave me the street cred to be a sub elsewhere. And so I started subbing pretty soon after that on Kinky Boots as a keyboard player, and then eventually as a conductor. And I loved that Kinky Boots family so much. And I often say the difference, there are many differences between Kinky Boots and Chaplin, but one of them is that Kinky Boots was a major hit and ran 6 years. And so they needed subs for that long period of time. And so I was able to be there a lot. And so I got a lot of experience as a player and as a conductor, getting to do that show a lot. And so Kinky Boots led me to Book of Mormon as a sub, because those shows have sort of the same musical family. And Stephen Aremus and Brian Yusufer are dear friends and people I look up to very much. And they sort of brought me from one to the other. And so I'm sort of subbing around on those 2 shows and a couple of other shows that came and went. I was subbing for a while on Rocky, which was really fun, and on the Sideshow Revival, which was really fun. I'm forgetting one. There was the Little Miss Sunshine musical off Broadway, which I loved, and I don't know if other people did, but I did, and it was really fun to play. And anyway, it is now like 2014, and I get a call from Alex Lackamore, who I had heard of and was a very big fan of. I knew like every note of the In the Heights album. I had like blasted it in my car driving like on the street outside here, over and over and over. And he knew me through a former boss of mine, a current boss of mine in some ways, Emily Grishman, who's a mentor, a music copyist, and he knew me through her, but he also knew my sister, because my sister at the time was a musical theater actor and had done the 2nd national tour of Bring It On. This story is getting very long, but it's almost over. And so my sister had done Bring It On. There it is. And so she knew Lack and she knew Andy Blankenbuehler that way and the rest of the family. So he calls me, and I was remembering today, like the first thing we talked about was my sister and how much he loves my sister. And I'm like, yeah, my sister's rad. Anyway, he was looking for basically an associate music director, somebody to basically fill in for him on the reading of a 5-day reading of a new musical. He says, this musical doesn't have a title yet, but it's the star is Ben Platt, and Ben Pasek and Justin Paul wrote the music, and it's a really great score, and we're really excited about what it is, and would you come and do this with me? And I was like, well, I've heard of those people, and that all sounds very exciting. And so I of course, the show turns out to be Dear Evan Hansen, and I was floored by it. I fell in love with it. And the very short version is that I fell in love with Dear Evan Hansen and basically bothered him to stay involved with that show. And he essentially poached me from the one project and brought me to the other, which was very, very nice of him. And what ended up happening was that I kept bothering him about year in Hanson. And he essentially kept saying, no, I think I'm all set in that world, at which point I figured I was never working for him again. And he comes back to me and says, well, but actually, what are you doing right now? And right now was Hamilton had just opened at the public. This is March of 2015. It had opened about a week and a half earlier. And they needed another rehearsal pianist because they had announced their third extension at the public because, of course, you couldn't get a ticket. And Alex and his associate, Kurt, dear friend of mine, were both too busy to be doing rehearsals once the extension happened. So they hired me. And yes, I would say that I was swapped out, says my dear friend Kara, who works in food TV and knows that a swap out is that thing. I learned this when you have the casserole and you put the casserole in with all the ingredients and you put the one in the oven and then you take out the done one. I learned that that's a swap out. Okay. Anyway,
learn something new every day.
You know, what can I say? Anyway, so I came on board as a rehearsal pianist like 2 weeks after the show opened, and my job essentially was to teach the understudies, because the thing that I think makes this original cast unique, and it's purely by necessity of the show originating as an off-Broadway musical, was that almost all of that original ensemble had understudies as principals. And all of them, I think, but one. I'm going to get that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And so my gig, exactly. So my gig was to sit with them one-on-one in Alex's dressing room at the public, which had a keyboard in it, and teach them the show, because of course they were all in the show in their ensemble tracks, but many of them had no idea what the principals were actually doing, because as you've all now seen, their individual tracks as ensemble members are so intense and so involved, and they have so much to learn. It's not as if they're spending their off moments like reviewing their principal stuff. And I remember so many instances of being with those ensemble members and we were looking at music together and they'd be like, that's what these lyrics are? Or learning things for the very first time. It was fascinating. And who could blame them? Because they're doing so many other things. Anyway, my very first day was with John Rua, who's the original Charles Lee. And I taught him the Hamilton track. And we sat in Alex's dressing room and sort of started at the beginning and got as far as we got in like 4 hours. And it was fascinating, and I learned so much. And then fast forward to now, Broadway happened, and I started subbing there. And flash forward, I was there as a conductor, and then I became the associate music director, and then I became the music director. And like 45 minutes later, Broadway shut down, and now it's today. Wow. That was a long answer.
That's well. I mean,
sorry about that.
Please, it's quite the origin story. I love to hear that, like, you were like pestering, maybe is maybe a strong word to say about to Alex, but it paid off. It's like what I'm thinking of with Chris Jackson. Every time he would talk to Lynn within the Heights, he's like, yo, act 2 solo, what up? And then he got one last time. So sometimes, you know, asking for what you want is a good thing. And I love that story. And it is so crazy to think, like, those ensemble members and swings, and like, don't even get me started on universal swings. Totally. What? Like, I can't understand.
Those brains are truly unbelievable. I'm so amazed by them, and their work ethic and their knowledge of the show is truly unmatched. And I give them such major props. Those people who cover multiple roles times multiple cities. I'm amazed by them. They work so hard.
I could only imagine. And it's kind of funny that you brought up John Rua out of everyone, because fun fact for your day, John Rua danced at my bat mitzvah. He danced
at your bat mitzvah?
He was one of the dancers. You know how there are like dancers
I do know how there are dancers. I know all too well how there are dancers. And John Rua was one of the dancers?
He was one of the dancers, a family friend, a cousin, you know, connection. And we were looking for dancers. And it was so funny. I only realized it really because Lynn had tweeted out maybe like a year or two ago. Like, I used to dance at bat mitzvahs. I think he said like in Boston, which is kind of random. And so everyone was like, you should see if, you know, because the timing was right around when it would have been my bat mitzvah. And even though Westchester, like that could have happened. So I was looking at pictures and I was like, wait, that's John Rua.
Oh my God. That's incredible. Yeah. It should be the first line on his resume.
I think so too. Like Hamilton, pretty cool in the Heights, whatever, like amazing choreographer, but like
sure.
danced at shows, bat mitzvah.
We all know where the priorities should lie. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's actually the beginning of his origin story.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yes. So enough of that little side thing. So I feel like I have so many questions, but I also want to be cognizant of time and how many other, you know, subjects and things that you've been a part of. But what is it like being in the room where it happens, where you're teaching all of these new cast members for all the different ensembles, and especially having been with it since the public and being a part of something that's like so much bigger than like all of us?
It's a very deep question. It's very intense, I think, in the moment. But having this weekend, especially with the release and not being in the throes of it at the time, like just being purely as a sort of passive member of the audience, just as much as everybody else, has been very fascinating to sort of reflect on. Oh wow, this is a relatively large thing that I'm a part of, because I think, you know, I think I cycle between when we're doing the show, I think I cycle between moments of real excitement, like, oh shit, you know, there was a big, you know, Hamilton moment on the Fallon show or whatever, you know, and that's exciting, and I'm a part of that. And there's also moments of total blinders on, like, we just have a show to put on and I have no real concept of the enormity of it, coupled with feeling an intense responsibility to the piece, and to take care of it, because, you know, I'm lucky enough to now have a lot of institutional memory, which is a factor of my having been there from, you know, that whole time. Like, I know that it's really important that Lauren's saying, tell your sister that she's got to rise up, because I was there when he wrote it. I was there when he changed it from what it used to be, which I have since forgotten. But like, you know, I know that like that little melisma in the vocal line is really important because he asked for it specifically. Like little things like that stick with me and make and give me a real, like I said, responsibility to get it right and to make sure that it sounds the way it's supposed to. But I remember, you know, being very, very weirded out, I think, at first, and surprised by the Hamilton mania that sort of swept the world. I expected the theater community to really love it. Like, I knew that it was a really good play. And I knew that like all my friends would love the album and they would reference some lyrics and we would all have a great time and watch it on the Tonys, and that would be the end of it. And I remember so vividly sitting in like a pret-a-manger on 8th Avenue and reading the New York Times Magazine, and there was a reference to Hamilton in the money column, which I do not read, but for whatever reason on that day I was reading it, and there's a reference to the musical Hamilton. I'm like, in the finance column in the New York Times Magazine, they're talking about a musical that I'm working on around the corner. That's very weird for me. I don't know that I answered your question, but it cycles through that like an awareness that the world at large holds this show in very high regard and wants to talk about it a lot. And it's been interesting just this weekend, just to see what people are writing about it as fans and as critics and as people that are aware of the moment that we're living in now, which is very different than the last time the internet blew up about Hamilton, which was 4 years ago. And that's been just so interesting. And it is hard to fully remove yourself from working on the thing and just read what people write. It is hard not to like read it with that double lens. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question.
I love the answer that you gave. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And it is so true, right? Like, this is not a moment, it's a movement. And there are like so many, like, we'll never be truly free until those in bondage have the same rights as you and me. Like,
Totally.
there's so many lines, even like yesterday, in the last 2 days, I've been really thinking of Burr's line, death doesn't discriminate between the sinners and the saints, with
Totally.
Nick Cordero passing away. Like, what a good human who like touched so many lives. Like, why did he have to go? And there's so many like bad, mean people, and like this great person. Not that like I'm maybe that came out wrong. Like, I don't.
No, I understand what you mean.
Wish death, but like it's all of these lines that maybe I've been listening to, or that I like have been singing like whenever. Now when I like hear it, it's like, oh, like it hits a little differently sometimes, especially.
You're
now.
absolutely right. It's one of the things I've always loved the most about the piece, is that the brilliance of the writing is such that it hits so differently depending on the moment that it's played in, which is true with any piece of theater. One of my biggest mentors is a guy named David Chase, who's a Broadway arranger and music director, and he has taught me that that one of the layers in which theater lands is the time and place in which it's viewed. And one of the things that's amazing about the writing of Hamilton is that Lin could never have known how prescient he was being when he wrote certain things. But the point he was trying to make, as I've heard him say many times, is that the arguments and the topics and the decisions and the conversations that were being had in the late 18th century have always been the conversations that we've been having in this country, whether that's about racism, whether that's about women, immigrants, guns, whatever it may be. And, I have loved watching how the prism changes through which we're looking at it, and how how different things land different ways. The line about women in the sequel on election night 2016 was a moment I'll never forget. Yeah. And, had Disney Plus released this film 3 months ago, we would have watched it very differently. And it's a fascinating thing, and it just speaks to the nature of the country, I think, not to like make it too lofty, but it really points to the idea that at its core, many of the issues then are still the issues now, perhaps with a different twist or a different lens, or obviously the rearview mirror of history, which is what makes the piece so good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And every time I hear it, immigrants, we get the job done. Totally. Like raucous applause. It's so interesting too, like hearing the different companies, what gets noticed. Mm-hmm. And is there anything that you've noticed either throughout time or with going to like, so actually I'm gonna take this back a second. Like, how many times have you actually sat in the audience either for like a full run through that, like you actually got to see it when you weren't like conducting, or in some ways like working as a spy on the inside?
Totally. I think 3 or 4, maybe. Opening night on Broadway. I took a long leave of absence last year. I was away from the show for 6 months, and like right before I came back, I sat in a seat and watched it then. When I saw it in London, I think that's it. And in my living room 2 nights ago. I think that's it. I've sat in the audience many, many times and taken notes. And of course, like from the conductor's podium is honestly the best seat in the house. That's not really true. There are better seats in the house, but I've seen it, I've seen a version of it in front of my face. I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 800 times. But to sit in a seat, not that many.
Wow. Yeah. And being from Chicago, did you ever get a chance to see that company?
You know what? I did sit in the audience in Chicago one time as well. So make that 5. Yes, I did a couple of times come by through Chicago, and we got to rehearse the band in Chicago about a year or so in, and I was here for that. And yes, they were an amazing, amazing bunch of people. And we've been lucky now to get a number of Chicago alumni now on Broadway, who I've since gotten to know. It was an amazing company in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah. Being at One Last Chai was like an experience. Never, it's funny how like Hamilton has all of these things, right? Like Hamil Film and One Last Chai and Hamil Fan and Hamil Fam. And like, it's just.
Listen, we love a pun in the Hamilton music department. And there are text threads that you would not believe going all the way back to like Tech on Broadway 5 years ago this week. There was a whole thing about restaurants with Hamilton inspired names, which are probably not repeatable on the internet, but they go very deep.
That sounds phenomenal. And it is fun to hear that y'all have so much fun, like whether it's the whole group or you and Kurt. Like we love Kurt Crowley so much. Like what's that relationship like? Oh,
Kurt, what a guy. It speaks very much to Alex and his awareness that he really wants to try to hire good people, which is still confusing as to why he hired me. But I think like he really knows that the personal element of it is really important. And he knows that, I found out years after I became the associate music director to Kurt as the music director. I found out years later that he asked Kurt who he wanted. And I was really the only other conductor at that time. I really was. That's not true. Our dear Mike Moyes was there as well. But that was kind of it, I think. And Kurt could have brought in anybody and he kept me, which is very sweet. And, but Lack knew that it was Kurt who would have to work with this person every day, that it shouldn't be entirely Lack's choice to make. He had sort of that awareness, which I think is so important for a leader and for somebody who manages people. But Kurt is, I've said it many, many times that I won the boss lottery with Kurt when I became his associate, because we were in our music director and associate roles for about 3 years and change. And we've now known each other for 5 years since I joined the show. And he's become one of my closest friends, and we're in touch most days about one thing or another. And I was honestly very concerned that would change when he left the show, and it turns out that it happened for many, many reasons. We're still very much in touch, and I was at his wedding, and I adore him deeply. He's taught me so much, and I've grown so much from learning from him, and he's an amazing friend. Too bad he has no musical talent, though. It's a real problem. Yes.
I know. If only we could inject a little bit of talent into him.
That's
that
right.
would be enough.
That's right. Exactly.
I can't help it. It's just like,
it's a reflex. I get it. I get it.
It's with like most shows. The funny thing too is like I've always been doing this with like Hairspray and Rent and Wicked and like whatnot, but I would make a reference and like no one would get it, and so then I would have to just like I'd have to carry on. And now that I do Hamilton references, people are like, hey, and I'm like, cool. So now it's like trained in my brain, like, oh, so it's okay. I can just continue making every reference. And so working with the two of you, I love seing those snobs. The Saturday night on Broadway.
Totally.
Hey, ready.
They're ready.
How do those processes go of like writing them and recording them? And especially, I know y'all just did the last one for the time being, but like transferring that from being at the actual Richard Rodgers to doing them at home and getting so many people involved, like that looked amazing and difficult.
It was all of those things, and thank you for saying so. I'm glad you enjoyed them. The snob tradition started actually all the way back in Heights, and was always just a backstage kind of thing, just for the cast and the crew and the orchestra backstage, just over like the PA that was run by the stage manager at the 5-minute call on the Saturday night shows. And that was really all it was just something for the company, just as like something to lift us into the Saturday night show. And when Alex started at Hamilton as the conductor, he sort of like brought the Saturday Night on Broadway tradition from there, because it was the same stage manager and so on. Anyway, Lack leaves the show, and now Kurt and I felt like we had to carry that on. And we sort of like, it became a little bit of a life of its own. And pretty soon we knew that reflexively, you know, like Wednesday or Thursday rolls around and we're like, we have to come up with something. And that I think is one of the things that actually brought Kurt and I even closer together, because we always had to sort of collaborate on something every week just to write a little something that gets heard by nobody except for our friends and colleagues at the theater. But it really challenged us to like come up with something quick and funny and stupid weekly. And we had to do something outside of work together, which was really fun. And sort of like, I think was one of the main catalysts of our friendship. And so when the shutdown happened, at first I knew that because the shutdown happened on a Thursday. So our last show was on a Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. And so Thursday happens and everybody's totally like taken by what's going on and there's a lot to process, and Friday happens and now it's Friday afternoon. And I sort of thought to myself, well, I should write a snob for Saturday because we're so used to having them on Saturdays. And so I just did one like with my phone, just like at the piano, and I like sang to the company and we like emailed it out. And shortly thereafter, it became clear that we should keep it going. And the longer the shutdown went on, the more involved they became until they, you know, we started to rope in actors from the company, and then we started to rope in musicians from the orchestra and so on. And they took on very much a life of their own. And we don't pretend to be video or really even audio production experts, but we had some amazing help to put them together. Justin Rathbun, who's our mixer at the show 8 times a week, started diving in to like mix them beautifully and do all the audio editing for us on the big ones, especially. And actually my aforementioned sister, who's now a comedian and filmmaker, she did all the editing on this last one, the Stars and Stripes thing. So we brought in the big guns for this last one. But because they got so involved in this era of remote working, as I'm sure all of us in this call have discovered in some form or another, everything just takes longer. Because you can't just like be in the room to like teach somebody something. You have to like make a demo and then send them the demo, and then they send you the video back and the audio back, and it just like takes forever. And they started to become like 4-day affairs to put together the work. And we loved doing it because it gave us such a high and like a fun little quarantine project. But I used to joke with Kurt, like, remember when we did these in 15 minutes backstage right before the thing? Wow. So that is why we decided to like take a summer break, and so that's where we are at this moment. But they were really fun to do, and look, the whole point of them always was to lift up the company and feel connected to the folks that we no longer see every day and who we miss very much. And if other people get a rise out of them, that is awesome, and that's a wonderful bonus. But I was thrilled to see that the folks at the show were enjoying them so much too. That made me really happy.
That's such a nice thing to hear too, that the intention was for the cast members and for that family. And I feel like that adds that extra like love, that something done for the fans is wonderful, but there's almost like a different expectation. Whereas if it's done for the inside and then everyone else is like privy to it as a like positive result, it's like, totally. Oh, that's why they feel so natural.
I think you're absolutely right. And like, look, I love the positive response we've gotten on the ones that we've shared publicly. It makes me really happy, and I'm thrilled that people have loved it so much. But it, you know, there's so much in it that's inside baseball, and many of the ones that we don't share are really just for that reason, that it's just like so inside jokey that like no one will get this if you're not there. But you know, something that even makes me think of the one we just did for the Stars and Stripes for July 4th. There's a moment like near the end where we cut really quickly on a guy who's just clapping, and he just like claps twice, and that's the end of it. And if you don't know, now you know that that's Kion Hersey, who was our music assistant on Broadway and at the Public. And his job, he was so intensely involved in the building of the show, and he basically finished on opening night, was his last day of work. And so we're still very much in touch, and we have our like music department, you know, group thread, and we see him when he comes to town and so on. But we wanted to involve him and Madeline Myers, who's seen in the video playing piano, who's our other music assistant from Broadway. Like, we wanted to involve so much of the original Broadway music family as we could, even if like I've seen in some of the like Instagram comments, like, who's that guy just clapping? And like, that's fine. And he loves it. He's like, that's my finest work. But we know who that is because he was so much a part of the fabric of building the score and building the show. And we miss him terribly. And So I'm thrilled that people are getting a kick out of it, even without that context.
Yes, yes, for sure. So I have one last Hamilton question, and then we'll switch on over to FLS for a few minutes.
Great.
Are there any like little Easter eggs that people watching this show now on Disney Plus for either the first, second, 50th time to kind of keep an eye out for?
This is good. This is good. So I've only seen it once, the film all the way through. I saw it in pieces during editing, but that was years ago. And so I'm trying to think of like what I'm allowed to share.
Yeah, right.
I think the things to look out for and are the things that was most interesting about this that my sister pointed out when we were watching it is that people can really hone in on choreography now that they can watch it multiple times. And of course, Andy's work is so brilliant and really makes the show in so many ways. And I think one of the things to look out for is how many of the choreography steps are repeated throughout the evening. There's a few in particular that I can think of that come forward, that repeat over the course of the evening and share like a common thread as they go. One of my favorites, and it's on my brain because my sister and I were talking about it, is something to look out for in Washington on Your Side. After dissidents, this kid is out. Oh, all that stuff. Southern Mother Republicans, that moment. And then they start walking downstage, the three of them, and there's a whole ensemble behind them. And they do this like amazing step back, stand up moment, which is this amazing step that I've always loved. And that step gets repeated again in the finale, right at the very end of the show. And what's cool is that there's all this meaning about why the step happens in this way once and then in this way the other time, and like what the thread is there. So there's all sorts of little moments like that to keep an eye out for now that you can see it a lot of times in addition to hearing it a lot of times. Of course, on one viewing, you see a lot of it and it's so much to take in. But now that you can repeat view, you're like, oh, I recognize that. Wow. That's one answer.
I love that. That's so interesting. Now I'm going to keep an eye out for it. The only other one that I've heard kind of like explode recently is the bullet, and like how like John Lawrence like puts his hand in front of Ariana DeBose so that she has like a break between her and Lynn. I was like, what?
I've never known this. Wow.
Right.
I told you, I've seen it, 500, 600, 700, 800 times, and I still see new shit in it every day. It's really amazing. Can I swear on this? It's the internet. I don't know. It's
Great. The internet. Why not? We're live, but we're not live to, network television. So.
NPR. Yes. Great.
NPR.
Would that we were.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I heard Lynn's interview on Terry Gross the other day, which is so good. He's been on the show, however many thousand times before, but he has a new interview with her that's current about the release of the film and the moment that we're in. Plug for that interview. Very, very good.
Excellent. Thank you for the plug. And I also want to take a quick note and say you're really good at like lifting up your friends and your sister and giving credit. And I think that's really great. So great job.
Thanks, Sho. High five.
Anytime, Ian.
Yeah.
So with the few minutes we have left, it would be crazy for me not to talk about seeing you in FLS and just like, how did you get involved in that journey?
It was FLS is a dream come true, truly. So Freestyle Love Supreme, for those who are not yet familiar, I was vaguely aware of Freestyle Love Supreme. I'd seen one show of theirs years ago. I was brought in along with Kurt on the same day in February of 2019, last year, during the off-Broadway run. It was previews off-Broadway, and it was an emergency call. I had a conversation with Tommy Kail, who is the director of both shows, Hamilton and Freestyle Love Supreme. And for those, for the people who don't know, now you know. And he had offhandedly said to me, this is months before, yeah, we're doing this thing with Freestyle Love Supreme, and like we'd love to bring you down and bring Kurt down and like come and jam with us. And like, do you do that? Do you improv? And I'm like, yeah, I do. He's like, great. So, we'll talk about that. And I heard nothing else. And I was like, okay, that's never happening. I'm never playing with Freestyle Love Supreme because those people are like the it crowd and amazing, amazing, brilliant people. I'm like, I'll never touch that with a 10-foot pole, which is also how I felt about Hamilton. Go figure. So I got a text on a Friday night in February. Hey, Ian, you might have heard that we might contact you. This is the management now of Freestyle Love Supreme. And are you available to do the show tomorrow at 6 and 10? And I had seen one show years earlier. I was like, I guess I'm available. I remember saying I could do the 6 o'clock, but not the 10 o'clock because I'm supposed to conduct Hamilton at 8 o'clock. So no. Anyway, they sent me video from the like last 3 performances that they had because it was going to be like the 4th preview or something like that, like Dropbox video. And I sat up overnight with my sister who was staying with me or something. And we watched those shows over and over and over again all night. And I watched it all day. And then I went and like did the show. I had met Shockwave before because he had come to Hamilton to do a beatboxing workshop with the people that beatbox in the show with the Elizas and the guys at the beginning. So I'd met Shockwave, but the others were strangers to me. I met them all that afternoon right there in the green room. We had about a 15-minute rehearsal on stage to like try to do something and try to play something together. And I had just met Arthur and now we have to like play a show together. And it was a thrilling, dangerous, really exciting moment. And I remember Kurt finished the matinee that he was conducting. I had taken the matinee off already, luckily. Yeah. Kurt finished the matinee, came down and watched me do the 6 o'clock. And then I left the stage of the theater at like 7:18, changed my clothes, got on the subway, arrived at the Richard Rogers at 7:51, and conducted the 8 o'clock show. And my brain exploded. And meanwhile, Kurt stayed down there to do the 10 o'clock show, which is so unfair. And I would say this to his face because he had the chance to watch it and then do it. I'm furious with him. And so then I came back like 2 days later and started doing more and more. And then I got to play opening, which was amazing. And then flash forward to the Kennedy Center, and then Broadway, and Kurt and I got to stay a part of the family, which was amazing. And FLS is truly one of my maybe the most unbelievable thing I've ever done. I love it so much. It fills my heart so deeply, and it's something that is never old because obviously just by the content of it, but there's no chance to get complacent in it ever. It is the most dangerous thing that I've ever done, and like you have to stay on your toes so deeply to contribute to it in a meaningful way. I miss those guys so much. It's crazy to me how quickly they became family. You know, I met them and like did a show with them in the same hour, and very quickly it was they, to their credit, I have to say that's a group of people that had been together for a decade, longer than that at that time, right? And they'd had a couple of new members come in. Ukarsh joined the group, and James joined the group, and Jelly joined the group, and Ashley joined the group. And that's like kind of it. I'm probably forgetting somebody. And other than that, it's like
Kayla, Broadway, you know.
But they hadn't yet when I joined. Right. And so
you're like that middle, yeah.
Right. And so they hadn't had a new member in years, in probably, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years before Kurt and I. Oh, wow. And to their unbelievable credit, they were so welcoming. And not only were they so welcoming, I've said this to them, they were so quick to say, yeah, take it, do whatever you want. This is yours too. As opposed to, here's the rules and only play in B flat and watch me for the changes and don't fuck up. They were like, Arthur especially just like handed me the keys on the first day. And I am so grateful for that. And it just points to their hearts and their knowledge that it only works, FLS, if everyone's got an equal stake in it. Yes. Right? If one person's the leader and you follow that person, I think it's false. And of course there's a host, right? That's different. But like, I was so amazed by that there weren't more rules. I feel like on that first day, I kept asking people, was that okay? Like, did I do it right? And they were like, yeah, it was great. Keep it up. Anyway, I miss it so much. I was lying awake at night, not sleeping, thinking about FLS and how much I miss them. And but we have a movie coming soon.
Yes, you do.
If you haven't heard, which I'm barely in. Do not watch this movie for me, or you'll be sorely disappointed. But it's really an amazing thing. It comes out a week from Friday on Hulu, and is that right? Friday? Yes, Friday. And
17th. We are Freestyle Love Supreme.
It's a really beautiful film, and what's amazing about it, I'm not going to spoil things. The boat sinks. Is that it's a Titanic joke. Thank
you so much.
You're so welcome. Never seen that movie. But what's amazing is that there's all this footage from decades ago, from 13, 14 years ago. And you see this group of friends who has like no idea what's about to happen to them. And it's an amazing portrait of this group of people that are enormously close and how they grow over time. It's a story about friends who rap and are idiots.
That's a great plug for what we're about.
Yeah, I might get fired for that, but I don't think I will. I think they'll wear that proudly.
I think you'll be fine. Yes, I'm so excited. And we were talking about when to schedule this, and it kind of worked out perfectly that Hamilton just came out and Freestyle Love Supreme is coming out next week. And you have such a hand in like both of those now from Broadway. And that's really cool. And just two quick points, because I'm going to let you go, but I have to let you know that Anna Spikerman and I saw you in Freestyle Love Supreme, probably like numerous times, but there's this one time that Anthony Two Touch was like doing his intro speech or whatever, and you're just playing like all of these like Dear Evan Hansen and In the Heights and Hamilton, and just like these like melodies like in the background, and like almost like subtly that if you weren't paying attention, you wouldn't notice it. And we're just like grinning because it was so much fun to have these like someone else who loves Broadway as much as we do, and to like have that like fun little like, and now knowing that you had that hand in Dear Evan Hansen, which I didn't know, that adds like that extra cool layer. So that's awesome.
That's very sweet. It's funny because like waving through the window is like the one thing that I just like remember from that workshop. Like I'm sure like the rest of it would come to me a little bit, but like boo boo boo, that little lick, like I remember like practicing the shit out of that lick because I'm like, this is awesome. And so like reflexively, like my hands just go there because I remember it so vividly. But it's funny because Kurt, by the way, is the real master of just like picking a tune from thin air. And I'm like, how did you know the like whatever of the whatever? He's like, I don't know. But he's the real master. But it's funny because I've said so many times that I have so little memory of what happens in a Freestyle Love Supreme show because like you're so in it, it like happens and then it's gone. And so whenever somebody says to me, I remember this one Freestyle Love Supreme show, I get so terrified because I'm like, I have no idea what you're about to say. It could be so mortifying. And so thank you for not embarrassing me too deeply. Although you said you have something else to say. So now I'm nervous again. And then I have something I want to say too, but you keep going.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, when you said that Arthur handed you the keys, it's kind of a double because also the keys.
That's true. Like he had, it's true. Like he is plural geniuses, not just genius.
Exactly.
That's right. It works on two levels.
Yes. And so what did you have to say?
Can I like totally left turn for 1 second?
Please do.
I'm reminded that my pal Kaylee, who probably left half an hour ago, as soon as I started like rambling about Hamilton, I wanted to talk about what she and I have worked together, because there's one more thread of like the Lynn story, which is that the Hamilton thing, the Freestyle Love Supreme thing, and then Kaylee, a dear friend from college days, works at Disney Theatrical, and she hired me to work on the junior stage adaptation of Moana, which was the coolest experience, and I learned so much from it. And it's it was a real chance to stretch my arranging muscles, but also to like try to take what I had learned from a couple years now on Hamilton and a little bit of Freestyle Love Supreme by that time, and just sort of like see what I had learned about the Lynn sound, which is what she said to me when she hired me. She said, like, you sort of like are familiar now with like what Lynn looks for, which is, I hope, a little bit true. And
the Lynniverse.
The Lynniverse. And I learned so much on that experience, and it's been fun for me to sort of like keep tabs on sort of different Lin Miranda pots. Is that a thing to say? I doubt it. But she's awesome, and I learned so much from that time, and I had the best time doing it. And it's now available, coming to a middle school near you, Moana Junior.
Wow.
And I look at, now that I'm down this road, I now remember, at the risk of totally blowing this out of proportion, there was one day last year when I worked on, oh, thank you, Kaylee. Your work is brilliant too. She's the best there is. There was one day in 2019 when I worked on 4 Lin Miranda projects in the same day. I did the FLS show at night. I did a Hamilton rehearsal. I think I like had a Moana meeting, and I did a little work on Fosse Verdon in the afternoon. And it was like, I think I wrote him some opening night card that I was like, sooner or later, I know you're going to fire me. So I'm just taking advantage of you while I can. Anyway, that was a crazy day. But anyway, that's my Moana tangent, because I remembered Kaylee's shout out from earlier. End of story.
That's a great tangent, and thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's so cool how like the Lynniverse, if we're gonna go with that, like especially with that, and then in the Heights movie, like hearing with like Kurt Crowley would like go over there, and I can't imagine how many times that like you or JMI would like do FLS, especially when it was like through the alleyway. You'd like, oh hey, I'm just gonna like do a matinee of Hamilton, do an FLS, and then like go back to Hamilton. Cool. Oh, and maybe I'll like catch the last song at FLS. What?
You have no idea. There were it was the 3 show days that got me, was doing the like Sunday matinee of Hamilton and then 7 and 10 at Freestyle Love Supreme. Excuse me, which I did a few times. And those were long days, but really, really fun. And like, you know, not to sappy it up for a second, but like, we're all so lucky that they keep their families so close. Mm-hmm. I'm so grateful for that. And, you know, look, you find someone like Kurt Crowley, you try to use him as often as you can. And the benefit of it is that we all get to learn so much about each other. Like Kurt now, especially, and I'm still learning so much of this, but Kurt knows like exactly what Alex wants, and like has no hesitation about like, yeah, I think this is the answer. Or in fact, I know this is the answer because Lack would want it to sound like this, or Lynn would want it to sound like this. It's just something that you learn over time. And I'm grateful to be in that universe. It's a special group of people.
Wow, that's amazing. So I was going to talk about this upcoming Chicago thing you're working on, but if are you still doing? I wrote this down. Where did I write this down?
What am I working on?
The Secret of My Success. Are you still working on that?
So funny. I was. So the Secret of My Success happened in January and February. What is time? It's so funny. I was on a call this morning with the director of that piece, Gordon Greenberg, and that show happened here in Aurora, which is like, I don't know, 2 hours that way, or hour, or 4 hours. What is time? At the Paramount Theater. There was a run of that show that opened in February, and then it got cut short by the pandemic. It closed in March, like everything else did. It's an awesome little musical, big musical actually, by these amazing composers, Mike Mahler and Alan Schmuckler, who are also Northwestern people who I look up to so deeply. And I was so excited to work on that show. So we hope that there is a future life for it. I had the best time doing it. It's a kick-ass score that I hope all of you get to hear sometime, because I loved it so much. So stay tuned.
Yes.
Based on a movie that I also have not seen.
You still haven't seen it?
No. It stars Michael J. Fox. It's from 87 or 88 or something. Never seen it.
Yeah. Amazing. So is there anything else that you came into today wanting to make sure to share with everyone?
Well, I really wanted to talk about swap outs, so I'm glad we got to do that. That was really important for me. Look, I'm thrilled that the movie, the Hamilton movie is getting such a play this weekend. That makes me happy, and I'm really excited for people to see the FLS movie. You know, I think none of us know what the future of the arts are, especially the future of theater. Mm-hmm. I don't have anything like special or profound to say about it, but I think we all miss it terribly, and we'll all be here really eager to come back to it when it's safe to do so. And none of us have any idea when that's going to be. But I think now we know, in a way that we didn't know when we shut down, that it's going to be a while, and that a lot has to happen in terms of safety before we can do that. And I'm hopeful that the world hasn't changed so much that there is no longer an appetite for live theater. I am hopeful that things come back in a way that we want to be in the same room, and we're not scared to be in the same room anymore, and we can tell stories to each other. I think like the difference between watching Hamilton at home in your living room in your PJs and watching Hamilton in a real theater, there are many differences. But like, as we were sort of talking about earlier, David Chase taught me that like what makes theater the unique art form that it is that everybody comes into the room and the same room and shares it together on the same night, which is all the more important and special for something like Freestyle Love Supreme, where like you come back the next night and you don't see the same thing. But even if you do, you see the same words in music when you see Hamilton on Thursday or Friday, but it's not the same experience. And maybe that's because there was something major that happened in the world on Friday that the person next to you knows about, or maybe that something happened in your life on Friday, or what you had for lunch. I don't know, I'm making shit up, but like, theater is about bringing people together in the same room and sharing something that will never be repeated, and which the movie is not. And right. So the movie is like an amazing way to like tide us over, which is why I'm so glad they're releasing it now. Yes. And bump up the release. But it's not the real thing.
Beautifully said. Yes.
I don't know.
No, it's true. It is true, because having seen it a bunch of times and then seeing this like magical production that like fills that like puzzle piece of mine of like getting to see most of the original cast, it just makes me want to go back and see it again and see like, because so much of it is also like Tommy's decision of like, when do we go tight shot? When do we go wide shot? And sometimes it's fun in the audience to be able to sit back and like let your eyes wander and like decide what to see. And like, I'll never forget the feeling of seeing it in London, and we were like dead center, like front 3 rows. And in my shot, when like the founding fathers, when they just like rush the center, and you're like, like oh my goodness, the emotions were just like, I wasn't ready for this. It was like this empowering thing. So I could never imagine not wanting that experience live, because a movie is amazing and it lives on forever. And it means that people can see it who might not be able to afford it or be able to go, or it gives it more access. So like, I am so thrilled for like 1,000,000 or 96,000 reasons.
Hey, she's still got it.
So that, and then, okay, where can people find you? And are there any like nonprofits or charities that you want to make sure people hear about?
Oh shit! I love that question. I wasn't prepared for that question. I'm so glad you asked. The Hamilton music directors, all of us in the United States, the 5 music directors of the 5 companies of Hamilton, we started plugging an organization that's called Hip Hop for Change, which is incredible. They're based on the West Coast and doing this amazing work teaching hip hop as a legitimate art form, as opposed to something that is like just sung by angry people about cars and women and money. And they teach it, like I said, as an art form, both in terms of poetry and performance, but also like graffiti and breakdancing and like all the culture that surrounds it, and trying to like legitimize it as something that can actually be studied now that there's 30, 40 years of history of hip hop, which is awesome. So that's Hip Hop for Change, which we've all backed and tried to like raise some awareness about. So check them out. Where can you find me? I'm not on Twitter. I've never been on Twitter. I'm scared of Twitter. But on Instagram, it's Instagram. Instagram I am, like Sam I am, which is a whole story because I wanted Instagram, but Instagram was already taken and I don't like to talk about it. So it's Instagram I am.
The sore spot.
Don't like to talk about it.
No. Wow. Amazing. And cool. Yeah, that's a great thing. And y'all can find me at B-Way Show, as you can see across this entire banner. B-Way Show, BWAYSHO. And the Show Must Go On line continues. We've got Sean Zuni tomorrow, the Broadway Makers Alliance. Yes, big fan, Sean Zuni. And then Broadway Makers Alliance on Thursday. Friday is Chelsea Hill, who designed this B-Way Show logo and is working with me on something else that's super exciting. So just you wait. Then we have Freestyle Love Supreme week next week. So stay tuned for that, please. I love it. We're starting off in Hadestown with Joelle Blackman on Monday, and then it's Tuesday. Let's see if I can remember the order, though it's on my website. So if I mix up the days, it is what it is. Anissa Folds Tuesday, Wednesday. I know, the best. Wednesday, Bill Sherman, and then. Oof. I know. I love that picture of you, by the way. I hope you enjoyed that I posted it, where you wrote over.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So good. And then Thursday, Andrew Jelly Donut. So that's who we have coming up. Join us here. It's every day at 2:00 our time here on the West Coast, and then 5:00 on the East Coast, where most of the friends are watching from. So thank you for watching. And then
wait, Sho, can I jump in for one more second?
Please do.
Can I tell the quickest Sean Zuni story and the quickest Bill Sherman story?
I would love it if you did.
This is so fast. I'm going to be really quick because all of you are like, get me out of this interview. Here we go. So Sean Zuni learned 37 tracks in Hamilton or something like that, because he covered everybody. Burr, Washington, Madison, all the things. And I remember teaching him Mulligan. He was also in the ensemble. So I remember teaching him Mulligan, which was like his 4th track, or maybe even 5th that he was learning. And his brain was like exploding as we went through the stuff.
Quick note. Sean goes by they. So I would just.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the catch. And we were going through the thing. And I remember like watching the brains melt as it went on, understandably, because there were 12 versions of the show in here. Right. And I remember getting to Guns and Ships and teaching Mulligan. And I remember saying, okay, so Mulligan is exactly the same as Man 6, as the part he knows from the ensemble. It's exactly the same stuff, nothing new to learn. And there's a long pause. And they said, that is so lit. It's incredible. Okay. And then very quickly, Bill Sherman on the February 2nd, my first show with Freestyle Love Supreme, calls me on the phone, and I'm like desperate for information. Like I said earlier, I'm like trying to know like what is the right way to play Freestyle Love Supreme. I'm like, what are the answers? What are the chords you use? What do you do? And I'm like freaking out at him over the phone. It's like 10 minutes till showtime. And Bill Sherman says to me, look, I can smell him like rolling his eyes through the phone, and you could tell him I said that. Look, when it's happy, play in major keys. When it's sad, play in minor keys. This isn't fucking brain surgery. Have a good show. It was amazing. The end.
I'm so glad you interjected with both of those two stories. I will most certainly bring them up.
Please.
Yes. And if y'all, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but one of the fun things we did, we had a Showtreons Hamilton viewing party. Showtreons are the B-Way Show Patreons who are awesome and support me, and y'all are amazing. And we have monthly video chats. So if that's something that you're like, whoa, that sounds pretty cool, y'all can head over to patreon.com/B-Way Show and join up. And a super easy thing you can do is subscribe to this B-Way Show YouTube channel and press like, because I remember growing up and seeing those like annoying YouTubers who are like and subscribe, and you're like, okay. But now that I am one of those YouTubers, it's actually really helpful. So like, please and thank you. Spread the word, spread the love. So on that note, I always like to end on that fun little plug.
We love a plug.
You are amazing.
You are. Thanks for having me. Thanks everybody for watching. There's probably 4 people left because I've talked for so long, but thank you for being there, and thank you for having me on. This has been so much fun.
Feelings are very much mutual. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Yours as well. Bye everybody.